Hi everybody, you've got Helen here today, and today we're going to look at how to do the small bean stitch. As you can see, it's a really texturific stitch. It looks really pretty and it's quite dense as well, so it's a really warm stitch. I mean, you can see how thick it is there. It's a really warm stitch despite the little gaps that you get between. It's a very versatile stitch as well. You can use it in pretty much anything, from hats and scarves and gloves to blankets and cardigans and just whatever you fancy really. The world is your oyster with this stitch. So I'm going to show you how to get the small bean stitch so it looks like it interlocks like that. So what I've got here is I've just very quickly foundation single crocheted 20 just to get my starting chain. You'll need an even number of stitches to make this, and the first thing we're going to do is chain 1 at the end to start. Then we're going to single crochet into that first stitch, and then what we do is we skip the next stitch and we start working our bean into the next stitch. So there's no yarn over to start with this stitch. We're going to go straight in there, yarn over and pull through. So we've got 2 loops in our hook. Now we need 3 loops in our hook, so we do that a total of 3 times in every stitch. So there's 1, then we'll yarn over, insert our hook, pull through, there's 4 stitches, yarn over, insert our hook into that same stitch, yarn over and pull through, and that's our 6 stitches on the hook. And then we'll yarn over, pull through all 6 stitches and chain 1 just to fasten that stitch up. Then we'll skip the next stitch and do exactly the same thing in the following stitch. So we'll insert our hook into the next stitch along, wrap yarn, pull through. So we've got 2 loops on our hook. Now with this, be careful that you don't leave too much give, otherwise your beans will end up with not being consistent, so you'll have little loops sticking out that are going to get caught on everything. So you need to keep it consistent and fairly tight for this one. So make sure that there's just the usual amount, just enough to get your hook through all 6 stitches at the end. So we've got our 2 stitches so far on there. We'll need to yarn over, insert our hook into the same stitch, yarn over and pull through for 4 stitches, yarn over, insert our hook into that same stitch, yarn over and pull through, and we've got our 6 stitches on our hook. So we're going to yarn over and pull through all 6, chain 1, skip the next stitch and repeat in the following stitch. So insert our hook, yarn over, wrap our yarn, insert it into the same stitch, yarn over and pull through for 4 loops on the hook, yarn over, insert it into the same stitch, yarn over and pull through. So we've got 6 stitches, and can you see the tension on there is quite tight because I don't want these getting caught on anything and looking a little bit messy. So then we yarn over and pull through all 6 loops on our hook and chain 1, and we follow that process all the way to the end of the row until we've got 2 stitches remaining. So we'll skip the next stitch and we'll bean stitch into the next stitch. It's quite rhythmical. It's a nice stitch to work, and you do get used to the fact that you don't need to yarn over at the beginning of the stitch. It's quite a comforting stitch to work really because of the rhythmic nature of it. So I'm just making my way to the end of this row this is the last bean stitch, chain 1, then I've got 2 stitches left there, so I'll skip the next stitch and I will single crochet in the last stitch. So the first stitch in the last stitch of every row when you're working the bean stitch in rows is always going to be a single crochet. So then we'll chain 1 and turn, and we'll single crochet into the first stitch, and then we follow, so we skip that chain 1 space that we had to close off the bean underneath, and we work into these more open gaps just to the side. So we do that on each bean stitch, and that will create the way that the stitches interlock with each other. So we'll skip that chain 1 and we'll work a bean stitch into the next stitch. You should be able to eyeball that once you've had a little bit practice, because it is a bigger gap. It should be a bit easier to see for you. So there's our first bean stitch. So then we skip that chain 1 and we work our bean stitch into this bigger gap here. So insert your hook, wrap your yarn and pull it through for 2. Wrap your yarn, insert your hook into the same stitch, wrap your yarn and pull through, and you'll have 4 stitches on there. Wrap your yarn, insert it into the same stitch, wrap your yarn and pull through for 6 loops on your hook. Wrap your yarn, pull through all 6, and then chain 1. Just tighten the top there. So then we'll skip this one and we work into this one. And we're going to do that all the way to the end. Whoops, just caught that yarn there. So we're working on the side of every bean stitch that we made underneath, and chaining 1 just to lock that stitch in place. And then we'll skip the chain 1 space from the row below and we work into the bigger gap. So I'll just show you. So I'm skipping this one, which is the chain 1 space, and we're working into the bigger gap there to do the bean stitch. And then we've got 1 more bean stitch left on this row. So we'll skip that stitch, which is the chain 1, and we'll work the bean stitch. So insert your hook into the stitch, pull it up, wrap your yarn, insert your hook into the same stitch, wrap your yarn and pull it through for 4 loops on your hook. Wrap your yarn, insert it into the same stitch, pull it through 6 loops on your hook, and wrap your yarn, pull through all 6 and chain 1, and then we need to single crochet into that single crochet on the end. So we'll just do that 1 more time. So we chained 1, we've turned our work, we're going to single crochet into that very first stitch. Then we're going to skip that stitch, which was the chain 1 space, the chain 1 that locked the bean stitch in place, and we're going to work into this bigger gap just down the side of the bean stitch and work our bean stitches. And then we'll skip the next stitch and we'll do the bean stitch into the next stitch. So insert your hook, wrap your yarn, pull through 2 stitches on your hook, wrap your yarn, insert it into the same stitch, wrap your yarn, pull through 4 stitches on your hook, wrap your yarn, insert it into that same stitch, wrap your yarn and pull through, and there's 6 stitches on your hook, wrap your yarn, pull through all 6 and chain 1. And then we'll skip this stitch and we work into this stitch and do the same thing. You can see it does become very rhythmical. It's quite a satisfying stitch to work, I think. And then you just follow that process all the way along to the end. Almost there. And this is the last one. Chain one, got one stitch left, so we're going to single crochet into that last stitch. And you can see there how the beans are starting to interlock with each other. Don't know whether you can see it better that way or not. Okay, so there are two ways of working when you need to change what type of stitch you're using. So say for instance I'm working a pattern that goes from a bean stitch to a single crochet. I've chained one before I've turned my row, and I'm simply going to single crochet into that first stitch, and instead of ignoring that chain one space from the previous row, I'm actually going to work a single crochet into it and a single crochet into the stitch that we would have worked a bean stitch into had we continued that. So you literally would work a single crochet in every stitch. Now you can see where the stitches are from where the V's are there. And we'd work that all the way along until we got to the end, the last stitch. We'd put a single crochet in that last stitch. Now there is another way of doing it, and you will have to check the pattern. So the other way of doing that is we've chained one at the beginning of our row before we've turned, so we'll work 2 single crochets in this first single crochet, and then we would skip that stitch, and in the stitches where we would have worked the bean stitch had we been continuing with that, we'll pop 2 single crochets or 2 stitches, whichever ones the pattern calls for, in that space. So then we'll skip that stitch and we'll pop 2 single crochets in that stitch. Skip this stitch and 2 single crochets in the next stitch, and we do that all the way along. And then when we got to the end, I'll just get to the end, we would simply put 2 single crochets in that very last single crochet, and that should keep your stitch count correct. So if you bear with me a moment, I'm just working that last stitch. So I've got my first single crochet and my second single crochet. So if we count it up, I should have 20. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. So that's the two ways of either finishing off or moving to a different stitch in a pattern. So just make sure you read the pattern to work out which one it is. If it doesn't say, you could pick either, but other than that, you're good to go. Please let us know how you get on with this tutorial. If you haven't already followed us, then please do subscribe to our channel and hit the little bell icon to be notified of any new videos that we post. Thanks for joining me today. Bye.